All right, so today we're going deep into some ancient legal text.
Ah,
Leviticus Chapter 6 from the King James Bible. And I'm really curious to see what kind of societal blueprints we uncover.
yeah,
It's really fascinating.
it is really fascinating how these texts, they're also viewed just through like a religious lens,
Yeah.
but they can really give us a window into the legal and social structures of these ancient societies.
It's like we're cracking open a time capsule.
Yeah,
And today, like, our mission is to go beyond just the rules themselves and really try and get a grasp on, like, the values and the beliefs that shaped these rules.
exactly. I think that's where like the aha moments come from when you connect
Yeah.
those dots and you understand the why behind the what.
So let's jump right into it. Leviticus chapter 6 kicks off with this discussion of trespass. But it's not just about religious transgressions, is it?
Not at all. It really dives into these offenses like lying,
Mm-hmm.
like stealing, even like failing to return lost property. Like
Hmm.
it really paints this picture of a community that's concerned with maintaining trust and fairness amongst its members.
And the consequences are pretty specific, too. It's not just about returning the stolen item. There's this interesting stipulation about adding a fifth of its value on top of it.
Right.
What do you make of that?
Uh, that's a detail that really jumps out at you,
Hmm.
doesn't it? It's like it goes beyond simple restitution,
Hmm.
and it seems like it suggests a real desire to deter dishonest behavior.
Yeah.
It's almost like a form of public shaming, or maybe a way to make sure that the victim was compensated for their loss.
Yeah, it makes you think, like, is there a deeper principle at play here? Like a belief in, like, restorative justice?
Yeah.
Instead of just punishing the offender, the focus seems to be on making the victim whole again.
Yeah, that's a fascinating interpretation, and it really suggests like this nuanced understanding of justice, one that prioritizes restoring balance in the community.
It really makes you think about how differently, societies approach the concept of justice.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears a little bit. One of the most, like, visually striking elements of chapter 6 is this instruction about the burnt offering.
Hmm.
The fire on the altar had to be kept burning constantly, like never allowed to go out. Why was that such a crucial detail?
Ah, the ever-burning fire.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a practical matter of keeping the altar ready. It was really like a powerful symbol of God's constant presence and his acceptance of the offerings.
So it was like a visual representation of their connection to the divine.
Exactly. It really infused their daily lives with a sense of the sacred and all the rituals surrounding it too. Like the priests meticulously handling the ashes and adding wood every single morning to keep those flames alive.
Yeah.
They all serve to reinforce that sense of awe and reverence.
Can you imagine the scene, like the flickering firelight illuminating the tabernacle and casting these dancing shadows on the priests as they're going about their duties? It must have been pretty amazing.
Imagine that heat radiating from that fire.
Yeah.
The smell of wood smoke just permeating the air
Yeah.
and like the hushed whispers of the priests as they move around the altar. It's like a multisensory experience, this constant reminder of the divine presence at the heart of their community.
It really emphasizes how central this concept of holiness was to their lives.
Yeah.
And speaking of holiness, Leviticus chapter 6 also goes into great detail about the food laws, right?
Absolutely. And these rules weren't just about arbitrary restrictions. It was about delineating between the sacred and the profane,
Right.
maintaining that ritual purity.
We see this in the specific instructions about, like, who can eat which offerings, how they have to be prepared.
Right.
Even the cooking pots used for certain offerings had to be broken or meticulously cleaned afterwards. Was a reasoning behind all that?
It seems like these rituals weren't just symbolic acts, but rather a way of life imbued with a sense of the sacred.
Okay.
Consider like unleavened bread.
Uh-huh.
In many ancient cultures, leaven or yeast symbolized like corruption or impurity.
Interesting.
So by using unleavened bread in their offerings, they were symbolically rejecting those elements and affirming their commitment to purity.
It's so interesting how food, something so basic to human existence, becomes so intertwined with their spiritual beliefs.
Right. It speaks to the way that ritual can really elevate even the mundane aspects of life, imbuing them with deeper meaning. And food being so essential for our sustenance, it naturally became like a focal point for expressing those values.
Make you think about how food rituals in various cultures today reflect, those same underlying values and beliefs, even if the specific practices might differ.
Think about it. Many religions, even secular traditions, have specific foods or ways of preparing foods for certain special occasions.
Yeah.
It's a way of expressing identity, belonging, and a connection to something greater than ourselves.
It's like a thread that runs through human history, this desire to imbue our meals with meaning.
Yeah.
But before we get too lost in the symbolism of ancient cuisine, there's another element of Leviticus chapter 6 that I find particularly interesting:
Okay.
the sin offering and the potent role of blood.
Ah, yes, the blood. That's where you really start to see
Sure.
like the weight of these rituals, the intensity of their beliefs.
The text highlights this idea of blood as a force of life, atonement, and cleansing. And even garments sprinkled with blood from the sin offering had to be washed in a holy place.
Right. It's not hard to see why they would take such precautions.
Yeah.
In these ancient cultures, blood wasn't just a bodily fluid. It
Yeah.
represented the essence of life itself.
So spilling blood, even in a ritual context, would have carried a lot of significance.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It symbolized a sacrifice,
Yeah.
a giving up of something precious to appease or connect with the divine.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about appeasing a higher power.
Right.
It was also about purifying yourself, restoring balance
Yeah.
within the individual and within the community.
It makes you wonder how these ancient beliefs about blood compare to our modern understanding. We know so much more about its biological function now,
Right.
but yet it still holds a certain symbolic power.
Think about it. Blood is still such a powerful image in art and literature,
Ah.
often evoking strong emotions and, representing life, death, sacrifice, even fear.
Yeah, it's like there's this deep-seated, almost instinctive reaction to blood that transcends cultural boundaries.
Exactly. While science may have demystified, many aspects of the human body, blood remains this potent symbol reminding us of our mortality, our vulnerability,
Right.
the very essence of what it means to be alive.
Yeah.
But in the context of Leviticus, it's also about cleansing, renewal, atonement.
So by offering a sacrifice, giving up something precious, they sought to make things right, to purify themselves in the eyes of God.
Yeah,
It's a very powerful concept, even if the methods might seem strange to us now.
indeed.
Yeah.
And it speaks to this universal human need for forgiveness, redemption, a sense of peace.
Mm.
These are desires that really transcend time and culture.
Yeah, but there's another fascinating aspect of the sin offering that I think deserves our attention.
Okay.
Who gets to eat it?
Yes, we were just talking about how the priests ate part of the meat offering.
Right.
But the sin offering had different rules.
Yeah, it's...
Absolutely.
Mhm.
According to chapter 6, only specific priests were allowed to eat the sin offering, and only under very specific circumstances.
Mhm.
For instance, if any of the blood was brought into the tabernacle to make atonement, the entire offering had to be burned,
Oh, wow.
and no one could partake.
That's interesting. What do you think was the reasoning behind that?
It seems to relate to the severity of the sin being atoned for.
Okay.
So offerings brought into the tabernacle, which was the most sacred space, likely dealt with more serious transgressions.
Right.
So in those cases, even the priests who normally consumed the offering had to abstain, emphasizing the gravity of the situation.
So even within the priesthood, there were levels of holiness, different degrees of separation required depending on the nature of the offering.
Precisely. It all points back to that overarching theme of order and hierarchy.
Yeah.
Every element has its place, its specific rules and rituals.
Right.
And understanding these intricacies helps us to grasp the worldview of the people who lived by them.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, revealing a society that was deeply concerned with maintaining order, purity, and this connection with the divine.
Yeah.
But as we continue our deep dive into Leviticus chapter 6, I can't help but wonder, what insights can we glean from these ancient practices that might be relevant to our own lives today?
That's the question that lingers, isn't it? While we may not live by the same laws or rituals, there are echoes of these ancient concerns in our own modern world.
Yeah.
Perhaps by examining these practices, we can better understand ourselves and our own search for meaning, connection, and a sense of order in a world that can often feel chaotic.
Yeah. It's fascinating how even in like a secular age, we still grapple with many of the same fundamental questions that preoccupied these ancient societies, the search for meaning, the desire for justice, the need to make sense of like our place in the cosmos. Like these are like universal human experiences that transcend time and culture. And it's not just about these grand philosophical concepts, Leviticus chapter 6 also reveals the meticulous ways they sought to maintain order and purity in their daily lives, right down to the specific instructions for the priests.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Their role wasn't just about performing ceremonies, it was about embodying and upholding a sacred order.
We see this in like the elaborate procedures they followed, like the rules about changing into like specific garments when handling the ashes from the burnt offering.
Precisely. It wasn't simply about hygiene. It was about stepping into a different state of being, separating themselves from the ordinary world while they were performing these sacred tasks. Remember, these priests, they weren't just functionaries. They were intermediaries between the people and the divine.
Yeah.
Every action carried symbolic weight.
It makes you appreciate, like, the weight of responsibility they must have felt.
Right.
And speaking of responsibility, we haven't even touched on the meat offering yet. This one seems to differ from the others in a key way, doesn't it?
Indeed. The meat offering provides a fascinating glimpse into the hierarchy within the priesthood itself. Unlike the burnt offering, which was entirely consumed by fire, a portion of the meat offering was actually given to Aaron and his sons to eat.
So they were allowed to partake in the offering. I thought everything was burned on the altar.
Not in this case. So after a symbolic portion of the flour and oil and frankincense was burned as a memorial to the Lord, the rest of it was designated for the priests. But even their consumption of the sacred food was bound by strict rules, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It couldn't just be like a casual meal.
Right.
They had to consume it with unleavened bread in a holy place like the court of the tabernacle.
Yeah, it's a striking example of how ritual permeated even the most basic human act of eating. Every detail from the ingredients to the location reinforced the distinction between the sacred and the profane.
And the fact that only the priests were allowed to partake in this offering speaks volumes about their elevated status within the community. They were in a sense sharing a meal with the divine.
Exactly. It reinforces this idea of a carefully structured hierarchy, a system where every element has its designated place and purpose.
It's almost like we're piecing together a social map with the priests occupying this unique and privileged position within this intricate system.
And their actions weren't just about maintaining their own purity, they were responsible for upholding the sanctity of the entire community. Their role was vital in preserving that delicate balance between the human and the divine.
It's a far cry from our modern, often secular understanding of leadership.
Right.
But there are still some interesting parallels, aren't there?
Yeah.
We still look to leaders, whether religious figures, politicians, or even community organizers, to guide us, to set an example, and to help us navigate this complex moral and ethical terrain.
That's a keen observation. The forms may differ drastically, but that underlying human need for guidance, for someone to articulate and uphold shared values that persists across the ages.
It makes you wonder if there's a timeless wisdom embedded in these ancient practices, something we might learn from even in our vastly different world. But before we get too philosophical, we still have one more piece of this puzzle to examine.
Okay.
The sin offering and the potent symbolism of blood in their atonement rituals.
Yes, the sin offering. It's here that we see the most visceral expression of their desire for purification and reconciliation with the divine Leviticus. Chapter 6 provides a detailed account of how the blood of the sin offering must be handled.
And the precautions are remarkably specific. Any garment sprinkled with it had to be washed in a holy place. And even the cooking pot used to prepare the offering had to be either broken or meticulously cleansed. What do you make of such stringent measures?
It really underscores the profound reverence they held for blood, viewing it not just as a bodily fluid, but as a sacred substance imbued with life force and spiritual potency. Remember, in many ancient cultures, spilling blood, even in a ritual context, was a deeply symbolic act.
It signified a sacrifice, a giving up of something precious to appease a higher power or to atone for a wrongdoing.
Precisely. It was a way of acknowledging the weight of transgression and seeking to restore balance not only within the individual, but also within the community.
It's interesting to consider how these ancient beliefs about blood might resonate with our modern understanding. We may no longer attribute the same spiritual significance to it.
Right.
But blood still holds a certain fascination, even a primal fear in our collective consciousness, doesn't it?
Think about the imagery used in horror movies.
Yeah.
The visceral reactions we have to seeing blood, even the way it's depicted in art and literature.
Yeah.
It often carries this heavy weight of meaning, evoking strong emotions and reminding us of our own mortality and vulnerability.
It seems like there's a deep-seated, almost instinctive response to blood that transcends cultural boundaries. Even in a scientific age, it retains a certain symbolic power.
Absolutely. While science has demystified many aspects of the human body, blood remains this potent symbol, reminding us of the fragility of life, the interconnectedness of living things, and the enduring power of ancient rituals that sought to harness its symbolic force.
It's a reminder that even though our understanding of the world has changed drastically, certain symbols and rituals retain their ability to evoke these deep-seated emotions and connect us to a shared human experience that stretches back through millennia.
Yeah, it's remarkable how these ancient texts can still spark such profound reflection and insight. But as we delve deeper into Leviticus chapter 6, I'm curious to explore another layer of complexity. The text outlines specific scenarios where even those designated to consume the sin offering had to abstain.
Okay.
Why do you think that was the case?
You're referring to the instances where the offering had to be burned entirely and no one could partake.
Exactly. What was the significance of those exceptions?
It seems to suggest a hierarchy even within the act of atonement, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
Certain transgressions were deemed so serious that they required a more complete separation, a greater degree of purification. Even those entrusted with upholding the sacred order had to acknowledge the gravity of those offenses.
That's a fascinating interpretation. It suggests a nuanced understanding of sin and atonement, recognizing that not all transgressions were equal.
And it reinforces this recurring theme we've been unpacking.
Yeah.
Meticulous attention to detail, the striving for order and balance, and this profound reverence for the divine that permeates every aspect of their lives.
It's a testament to the power of ritual to shape not only individual behavior, but also the very fabric of society.
But before we get too carried away with analyzing the intricacies of ancient rituals, let's bring this back to our modern world for a moment.
Yeah.
Do you think there are any parallels to the way we approach morality and accountability today?
It's a thought-provoking question. While we may not have elaborate sacrificial rituals, we still grapple with questions of right and wrong, justice and forgiveness. We create systems of laws and ethical codes to guide our behavior, and we develop personal moral compasses to navigate complex situations.
And those systems, those compasses are constantly evolving just as they were in ancient times.
Precisely. The forms may change, but the underlying human struggle to define and uphold a sense of morality persists across cultures and throughout history.
It's like we're all engaged in this continuous process of seeking balance, of striving for harmony within ourselves and within our communities.
And perhaps by studying these ancient practices, we can gain a deeper understanding of our own moral impulses, our own search for meaning and order in a world that can often feel chaotic and unpredictable.
It's a reminder that even though we live in a vastly different world, we're still connected to these ancient seekers, wrestling with many of the same fundamental questions about how to live a good and meaningful life.
And that's the beauty of exploring these texts, isn't it? They offer us a glimpse into a different way of being, a different way of understanding the world.
Yeah.
But they also hold up a mirror to ourselves, prompting us to reflect on our own values, beliefs, and practices.
It's like we're engaged in a conversation across the millennia, sharing insights, challenging assumptions, and ultimately gaining a deeper understanding of what it means to be human.
Yeah, it really is amazing how relevant these ancient texts can feel.
Yeah.
Even though they were written in a world so different from our own.
It speaks to, I think, that enduring power of human nature. We may have advanced technologically,
Right.
but those core concerns, justice, morality, the search for meaning, those haven't changed all that much.
It's like we're all part of this ongoing human story. Each generation adding its own chapter while still grappling with these same fundamental questions.
And Leviticus Chapter 6 offers us a particularly rich chapter, filled with these intricate rituals and symbolic acts that illuminate the worldview of these ancient people.
Yeah.
We've explored, the concept of trespass and the emphasis on restoring balance within the community.
Right.
We delved into the symbolism of the ever-burning fire and the priest's meticulous duties. We unpacked food laws and their connection to purity.
And we even grappled with that potent symbolism of blood in those atonement rituals.
We've really gone deep.
Yeah.
It's been quite a journey through this ancient text.
It has been. And as we approach the end of our deep dive, I'm curious to hear what has struck you most profoundly throughout this exploration.
Okay.
What stands out as like a key takeaway for you?
I think what has surprised me the most is the sheer complexity of this system. The
That's-
meticulous attention to detail in every aspect of their rituals. It's a far cry from the way many people perceive ancient law as just a simple set of rules. But what we've uncovered is this nuanced system that's designed to address not just individual behavior, but also the needs of the community as a whole.
I agree. It wasn't just about dictating right and wrong. It was about creating a framework for social harmony,
Yeah.
for navigating these complex moral dilemmas,
Right.
and for maintaining that sense of order and connection with the divine.
And it's striking how much emphasis they placed on symbolism. Every act, every object, every ingredient held a deeper meaning, a connection to something beyond the material world. It makes you realize how deeply ritualistic their lives were.
It's a reminder that symbolism isn't just a literary device.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental aspect of human experience. a way of imbuing our lives with meaning and purpose.
It makes you wonder if we've lost something in our modern, often secular world.
Right.
Have we become too focused on the rational and the practical, and neglected the power of ritual and symbolism to connect us to something larger than ourselves?
That's a question worth pondering.
Yeah.
You know, while we may not embrace the same rituals or beliefs, we still yearn for meaning, for connection,
Right.
for a sense of transcendence. Perhaps by studying these ancient practices, we can rediscover the importance of ritual in our own lives,
Yeah.
finding new ways to express our values,
Hmm.
connect with our communities, and find a sense of purpose in an increasingly complex world.
It's like we've come full circle.
We have.
We started by diving into this ancient text, and we've ended up reflecting on our own modern lives and the ways we seek meaning and purpose. It's been an enlightening journey, to say the
It
least.
certainly has. And I hope our listeners have found it equally enriching. Perhaps this deep dive into Leviticus Chapter 6 has sparked some new questions, challenged some assumptions, and even inspired some to explore their own personal rituals
Yeah.
and the role of symbolism in their lives.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for a way to connect with something larger than yourself, to find a sense of purpose and belonging, you might be surprised at the wisdom you can find in these ancient texts. They offer a glimpse into a different way of being, a different way of understanding the world, and ultimately a different way of understanding ourselves.
So as we wrap up our exploration of Leviticus Chapter 6, let's carry these insights with us, embrace the power of ritual and symbolism, and continue to seek meaning and connection in our own unique ways.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking those deeper truths that connect us all.